welcome to the stream. I had to bring Morty with me because I don't know. I just felt like it was time for Morty to join the live streams. He's a very important character in my life, and so him not being here all the time is just kind of we're missing something without this little guy. But yeah, Morty is the most loving little guy. Raise this up a bit so you can see him. Anyway, I'm sure that he probably won't stick around because he is a cat. But welcome, everyone, to today's live stream. And these days, what I've been doing is trying to figure out new concepts to go over in these live streams. It's actually quite fun. It's definitely interesting. Trying to think about, all right, what are all the problems that Chinese learners face? And of course, we've asked this question of people on the Mandarin Blueprint method and in the Blueprint many, many times. But what could we do to solve those problems on a daily basis? This live streaming thing is so fun, and it gives us a chance to talk directly to you guys. And I like sharing this stuff because I find that Chinese characters in particular rule. They're so interesting, and they build a connection to just basic concepts that, like, they frame the world, they frame basic concepts in a different way as a result of having a logographic language based on characters. And what's interesting is you end up getting a kind of relationship with each character. Each character starts to have a feeling with it, which is somewhat how I imagine people with synesthesia feel. And if you've never heard of synesthesia, my friend Casey has it. It's like they'll hear a sound and then they'll go, they'll think to themselves, oh, that sound is red, right? Or, oh, this note on the piano is green to me, or a number is purple. Like 5 has always been purple to me. It sounds strange when I hear it, but I actually feel that way about Chinese characters. It's a feeling tone that comes along with them. And I always hope that other people can see this, because what a cool and interesting way of getting to know another culture through the language itself. And China is a culture that's well worth understanding. These days, the framing of China is always focused on the political, which I'm not saying is something we shouldn't focus on, but it is missing the fact that it's a 5,000-year-old culture. At least there have been genetic lineages that have followed that path. When Chinese people say we have 5,000 years of history, a natural sort of Western response is to say, like, what, the Mongols never invaded and you never got taken over? Because we tend to think in political terms, like if an empire falls or a dynasty falls, then suddenly it's no longer the same thing. But what the Chinese would say in response to that is like, okay, but what happened after the Mongols invaded? Did the people who were Mongolian force the Chinese that were there to become like Mongolians, or did they turn into culturally Chinese people? Sinicization, right, is what that's called. So turning from, like, basically what happens to a lot of people who have invaded China throughout history is they end up adopting the culture. So China is a very powerful culture. There have been memes that have traveled through the country for thousands and thousands of years, and the language shows that, and it's just so much deeper than the current political reality. Now, again, I'm not downplaying the current political reality. It's always important to understand what's going on in the world, but I guess I'm just saying that sometimes I feel despairing when I see how people talk about China, because I'm like, it's not that you're wrong necessarily about the thing that you're saying about, Xi Jinping or something like that, but it's just not everything. There's so much more to it. There's so much more to the people and the language and the culture and all that stuff. So, oh, cool. Yeah, I'm glad to see that somebody else has heard of this synesthesia thing. So, anyway, I just think that learning the Chinese characters is a great way to connect with the culture. Even if you never get a chance to go there, it's a great mind exercise to learn this stuff. And so to help frame today's presentation, I will want to talk a little bit about some of the other stuff that we've been talking about. So, since we started this live stream situation, I've done a couple of live streams about my time in China and shared some photos and shared some doors that have opened for me as a result of learning Chinese. And it's not just life in China. I think many things have opened for me learning Chinese, even here in the States, because I moved back here in 2022. I've since been to the Buddhist temple that's just down the road on Capital of Texas Highway here in Austin. And when I got there, I got to speak Chinese to a bunch of people. And I've spoken Chinese to many people who are in Chinese restaurants, of course. I spoke to the owner of a place called House of Three Gorges, which is, he's actually from Hubei province, Hubei province near the Three Gorges Dam. And got chatting with him. And it's just really cool, the connections you can make with people, even abroad, because the Chinese diaspora, so that is to say the overseas Chinese, the Huayi, they are more numerous than of any other country in the world, I think. I mean, obviously you can make the argument that the cultural exports of places like the UK and the US might have more influence, but the amount of people, the amount of actual people who are Chinese in ethnicity but living elsewhere is, I think, more than any other ethnicity. And that's why you have Chinatowns in all of these various cities. And so it just means that Chinese goes way beyond just China. That's something that everybody should always know. Okay, so one of the things I will do is go through some of the chat messages before we start. Then I will move on to the presentation. And I might stop at some point in the presentation and check the chat. But then if you guys have any questions during the presentation, just put them in the chat and I will go over all of them at the end or during a break. So we'll see how it goes. I don't think it's going to be super long because it's kind of experimental, but we'll see what you guys think. So before I get started, we have a question from Carlos. Carlos says, I've been trying to learn Mandarin. Is it possible to self-study? Yeah, and the response here is it is possible to self-study Mandarin. It just take effort like any other skill you're trying to master. I agree with that. And I'd also remind people that, we had somebody in the chat the other day saying there is no way to acquire Chinese if you don't go to China and you're not surrounded by it in that way. And I would just encourage you when people say things like that to just think it through, right? Think it through like physics, right? Is it physically impossible? Is it physically impossible to acquire Mandarin if you're not in China? I think if you ask it that way, you realize, well, no, it wouldn't be physically impossible because, first of all, Chinese people are around. So like I just mentioned earlier, so you could potentially find Chinese people in your area to talk to. But it's not just about whether or not Chinese people are around. It's about the resources that are available in our modern world. I am live streaming to people all over the world right now who want to join, and it's instant and full of, I can talk to people all over the world instantly, and there's the ability to stream and listen to Chinese at all hours of the day if you wanted to. And so it's not physically impossible. Now, if you're not in China, do you have to put in more conscious effort to make sure that you're surrounded by Chinese? Sure. But you could also be in China and be avoiding Chinese. I've seen many, many an expat do that. So like, even though they're in China, just being there doesn't make you get fluent. You have to actually still interact with the language. So you could easily have somebody who's not in China, but they turn their house into a Chinese camp. And they just go, okay, every room is filled with Chinese books. Walls are covered with Chinese text. I have speakers playing Chinese all around me. And I make constant daily appointments with people on language exchange apps so I get a chance to activate. That person's going to get better at Chinese than the person who is in China but making no particular efforts, right? So, yes, it is possible to self-study, absolutely. Hello from Serbia. That's great to have a Serbian here. My wife is Serbian, born and raised in Belgrade. Hello from Ethiopia. Great. Have you here. Hello from China. Excellent. Interesting. Hello from Russia. Hello from Pluto. Well, excellent. And hello from UAE. Hey, the MB challenge sign up doesn't work for me. Do you know why? Oh, okay. So are you saying that you're clicking mandarinbp.com/challenge ls? Let me just type this in. mandarinbp.com/challenge ls. Oh no. It's redirecting me to our main website. Huh. I wonder how that's happened. It was working yesterday. Let me see if I can fix that presently. Um, Sorry about that. Let's see. Oh, you know what it is? I think it's just the capital. I think we just set up a capital letter C and that capital letter C. So you know what it should be? It should be mandarinbp.com/capital C challenge. I didn't realize that would make a difference, but if you go, so let me just type it in the chat right now. mandarinbp.com/capital C challenge LS for live stream. That just lets us know that, yeah. So there's the link. And so for those of you who are unfamiliar with the Mandarin Blueprint Challenge and what Luke Smith is talking about there, is that it's a challenge to go for either 15 or 30 days to get to basic literacy. So what we actually do in that is we teach you characters one by one and unlock words when you've learned 2 characters that make up a word. So most words in Chinese are 2 characters long. And then when you learn enough words and characters, you can then combine the words and characters you know into simple sentences. And because the method we use for learning characters is so effective, you will actually be able to read these sentences without the aid of pinyin. And so that's our goal with the Mandarin Blueprint Challenge. It's to get you to the point of basic literacy where you're reading real Chinese. And we have a 15-day version and a 30-day version. The 15-day version is requires more effort per day. Obviously, it's twice as fast. But both of them are great for getting started with Mandarin, started with the literacy side of it, because reading is so essential with Mandarin Chinese compared to other languages, because the spoken language has so few syllables overall. And since it has so few syllables, if you don't learn the characters, you're going to hear a lot of homophones, and it's going to get confusing. I knew many a person who decided, I'm not going to learn the writing system, and they got okay at Chinese, but they hit a ceiling because it's really hard to differentiate the words when you don't have a visual representation of them. And of course, the Chinese characters are the most interesting part of the language. I mean, the Mandarin language sounds pretty good. It's not like a bad sounding language, but it's not the most interesting thing. The most interesting thing is the characters, for sure. Okay. Let's just continue here with some of these from above. And let's see here. I think that the environment is the utmost important. We Hong Kong people do not have any tools to learn Cantonese. How we know is taught by teachers, listen and speak. I'm just saying, I do agree that your environment is super important. I'm just saying that you can design an environment these days that allows you to get lots of input. I heard words don't exist in Chinese. I mean, maybe there's some obscure definition of a word that somebody has some weird obscure definition of a word and that's what they mean. But no, words exist in Chinese for sure. I've been self-studying for about 3 years now as a hobby. I use Pimsleur and Duolingo, plus listen to podcasts and watch YouTube content. It's possible, but much slower than formal learning. Yeah, I mean, Pimsleur I think is a good thing to do. I don't think that Pimsleur is enough. Pimsleur kind of gets you to be able to speak the main phrases. It gets you some essential Chinese. It doesn't really build up your foundation of how the language functions on a kind of foundational level. For that, I think you really need to learn characters, and you need to learn them methodically, building off what you already know, so that the kind of imagine you're building a building, like the steel structure of the building needs to be strong, and the foundation into the basement needs to be strong. So if you have those 2 things in place, then yes, you can get to a level of fluency and literacy that's much higher than you would be able to with just a listen and repeat program and an app. Frankly, I don't know. You can tell me what you think of Duolingo Squanchy, but I've never found Duolingo to be all that like effective. I find it to be a fun game, I guess, but whether or not it works long term, I don't know. Okay, so here's what I'm gonna do, guys. I'm going to check out the chat again later. That's maybe at a break at some point, at very latest at the end of the presentation. But I'm going to show you some stuff about Chinese characters and words that are quite interesting, and give you a chance to, understand just why this is such an interesting and logical language. Mostly, I want to show you that it's a logical language because once you get past the initial barrier of learning characters, you'll discover that actually most words make total sense. So let me just do a quick thing here. I just want to make sure that I am... See, it's bothering me that link I wrote in the description is wrong, and I think that there is a way for me to just change that right now. But you know what? Here's the point. MandarinBP.com/C challenge LS if you guys want to sign up. Apologies for the incorrectly written link there, but I'm not going to stop the stream just to fix that. I didn't realize that would be a problem. So yeah, okay, cool. I will answer more questions in a little bit. For now, I'm going to get started with the presentation. So let's go ahead and do that and switch over to Keynote. All right, so this is the character D. Now, it actually has a few different usages, but the primary usage of D is just to say land. Something that is, it could be land or soil or ground or floor. There's different things you could do with D, but the left side component of D is actually the representation of soil in Chinese. So you get the concept of land. Well, if you combine D with the character qiu, which means ball, what do you guys think that would mean? Well, that brings you di qiu. So the land ball, I wonder what that might be. Well, it's the earth, right? So, there's these funny things that can happen with Chinese where you go, I wonder what earth is in Chinese. Oh, a land ball? Well, yeah, that's pretty cool, right? And then how about this one? You combine di with yu. This just means territory. For example, the word lingyu means like you've crossed over into my territory as opposed to your enemies or something like that. And so a diyu, this is just a region or an area of some kind. And there's actually another one that can serve in a similar way, which would be di dai. Dai means like belts, so a di dai is also a region or an area. Now, there's a minor subtle distinction between how you use diyu and di dai, but it's not that important to nail down. Like if you don't get diyu or di dai at any point, like it doesn't make that much of a difference, because some of these subtle distinctions don't they don't end up being naturally important in real life. But I will just point this out. Like when it comes to di dai, you'd use it for something like, say, a tropical zone, right? Like a di dai is more like a region that you actually could see as a belt of some kind. You could see it connected in that way. For example, you have the qihou di dai. That would be like a climate zone of some kind. You could have the jingji di dai, which would mean an economic zone. And that's like what Deng Xiaoping created in, Shenzhen and then later Shanghai and all of that. So, they might use Didai in that context. And then in the case of Diyu, you might use it in slightly more abstract things like culture or geography or nature, like a Wenhua Diyu is like a cultural region or a cultural area, or a Xingzheng Diyu would be an administrative region. So these are another way to use di. Okay, now this one I like a lot. So di, land, and then li, logic. So we get di li. What do you guys think this one would mean? So the land logic. Well, it actually means geography. And you could be more specific and say di li xue, which just means the study of geography. And so it's more like that's geography as a subject. But you can also refer to geography with a small g, just meaning like the geography of the area, not specifically the study of geography. And the point being that idea of geography it's just so cool how the Chinese break it down. It's like land logic. That's what geography is. So many Chinese words are like this. Then we have di plus xing. Okay, so you have xing, which means the shape of something. So if you take the land and then you take the shape, what would land shape mean? Di xing. Di xing. Well, it's actually, you can think of it as similar to geography in the sense that it means terrain or topography. So if you wanted to look at a topographical map, you would look at a 地形地图. So that would actually be two D's there. So 地形 means terrain or topography, and then 地图 is a land picture. That's how you say map. 图 is one of the words for picture in Chinese, and so a 地图 is a land picture or a map, right? It's pretty straightforward language. 震. This means to vibrate or shake. Okay, so land vibrate, land shake. 地震. Well, I'm pretty sure that you guys can figure out what this one means. This is an earthquake. And I remember I lived in Sichuan, so there were earthquakes from time to time. Now, Chengdu itself, where I lived, was not in danger of like a catastrophic earthquake, but it would feel the aftershocks of earthquakes that were further up in the mountains. And that was, in Abazhou, which is north of Chengdu in Sichuan province. They had a terrible earthquake, the Wenchuan earthquake in, I think it was 2008. And it was terrible there, but in Chengdu, they just kind of felt it. But buildings weren't collapsing or anything, but it was absolutely terrible in Wenchuan because that's where the fault line is. So, 地震. And what's interesting about this particular word, too, is this is a classic example of a word that is a subject predicate word. It's basically saying, 地 is your subject. So that's the subject. It's like a mini sentence. Right? Think of it like that. So it's like, 地 is a subject, and what happened to it? 震. It quaked or shook or vibrated. So it's actually a mini sentence in one word. There's actually 7 word types in Chinese, and I'll probably have a live stream about that at some point. But we have a YouTube video all about it, so you can check that out. But basically, there's like 7 primary compound word compositions, and by a compound word, I just mean one character combines with another character. They both maintain their meaning, and they combine to create, a new meaning. So the land plus ball, well, they still mean land and ball, but combined they mean the earth. How about kong? So this is the character for empty. So if you have a kong di, empty land, well, this is often refers to a vacant lot. Now it could just mean open space in general, but if you're going to see it in the context of like, I don't know, walking around a city, you'd be like, oh, 这是一片空地, right? And you would be saying that it is a vacant lot. So yeah, again, easy. The empty space, the empty land. It's such a simple language in that sense. So so that's our first one. Here's what I'll do. I think I'll just after every slide, I'll take a gander at the chat and just see what's going on. So nice. So we have Jeffrey asking, what's the best way of learning 100 characters a day in your experience? Well, I have plenty of thoughts about that. We built a course all about it. And of course, the first thing you would have to do is build a mnemonic system that it involves people from your life, objects that you can recognize, places from your life, and actions, POPA, and then apply those things that you've chosen to the study of Chinese characters in a logical order that builds on what you already know. If you do that, then you could learn 100 characters a day and remember them. But in order to get to that point, you'd have to learn about 30 to 50 characters to get the technique down. And then you would also have to focus on like nothing else but characters. So if you wanted to work on words and you wanted to work on some grammar beyond that, then that would be a little bit different than doing it from the perspective of like including all that other stuff. But if you just focused on characters and had already mastered the method, then you can do that. And we built it. It's called, the Henze movie method. It's a part of the blueprint, which is our flagship course that took us about 6 years to build. And I learned, using that method, except it was slightly less developed, or not slightly less, it was way less developed before the Mandarin blueprint method existed. And I managed to learn 100 characters a day towards the end of my study because I really wanted to get to that 3,000 characters number. So the last couple of days, I learned 100 characters a day. And, it can be taxing getting that high in number, but it's definitely possible. Okay. Hey from Brazil. Hi, Daniel. Oh, cool. Is Serbian harder to learn than Chinese? Do you know some words? And say hi to my countrymen. Yeah, I have not really properly tried to learn Serbian. I learned a few words. Hvala tashto. That's thank you, mother-in-law. But I decided, because we decided we weren't going to live there, that, I wasn't going to put the time in because I understand the time that it takes to acquire a language. And so even though I know how to, I just, have other priorities at the moment. But it seems, whether or not it's harder to learn than Chinese is an open question because obviously it doesn't have as difficult of a writing system, but it also has all of those tenses and all of those changes, like grammatical changes that Chinese doesn't have. The hard part of Chinese is the characters. Once you get beyond the characters, the words are easy, as we've looked at from this particular character here. And the not just are the words easy, but the grammar is simple too because there's no word form changes. There's no good, better, best. You just move the characters around in a sentence. This is why some people say Chinese doesn't have grammar. I don't really agree with that because, of course, one of the things that you'll say is the definition of grammar is changing word order or adding and removing words. And sure, Chinese definitely does that. You can change the word order, you can move the characters around, and the meaning changes. But still, though, there's no word form changes, and there's no declensions, and there's no gender, and all of that stuff. So once you learn the characters, it's very easy. Okay. All right. I find Duolingo handy for learning the pinyin. When phrases I learned in Pimsleur pop up on Duo, it's like a penny dropping moment where everything connects. Duo alone is okay. Yeah, gotcha. So, right. No question. I just want to say your content is very helpful. Keep it up. Thank you. Also, somebody early on said, thank you for, said that they think I'm a great teacher. I appreciate that. Let's keep going. I love this channel. I'm glad to hear it. So yeah, that's how I have been learning Chinese for the past month. I guess I'm on the right way after all. Nice. Hello from Uganda. Great to see you. Mandarin is a big challenge, but never give up. I agree. Yeah. I think if you have the mentality that I am a Chinese learner and I'm a Chinese enthusiast and that's just a part of who I am, then you will do the behaviors that a Chinese learner would do. And in the same way, like if I want to get fit, the best place to start is to say, okay, I'm an athlete now. Not start with, I'm going to lose 20 pounds. No, it's like, I'm an athlete now. What would an athlete do? Well, they would create processes for their diet and exercise routine, and then they would make sure that they do those on a consistent basis, and then the natural result of that will be the outcomes you want. But you have to start from that spot, start from that position. Nice. Hey Jay, thanks for your comments about Mandarin Blueprint. All right, so I'm going to continue here with some more on the presentation, and then we'll get back to the chat in a little bit. Okay, so D can also mean ground or floor, so it's not that much different from land. But what are some of the cool words you could make? Well, if you combine D with the character ban, which means plank, well, that will give you D-ban. And D-ban just refers to the flooring, right? So this is one of the things that I wondered about when I first started learning Chinese, because I learned the character D, and then I was like, but in English we'll say the ground, and when we say the ground, that can like kind of cover everything. But if we say the floor, that's definitely referring to, a building, like the floor of a building or the floor of a room. You wouldn't call the outside on the grass, you wouldn't call that the floor, right? Well, if you want to refer to just the floor specifically, it would be D-ban. D-ban. Now, how about this one? The ground blanket, D-tan. Oh, sorry, D-tan. That's third tone there, D-tan. So a ground blanket, well, that is a carpet, right? I used to have to always say this word because I'm a drummer, and I played a lot of gigs in China, and you have, because so many places weren't really prepared for a band, like they have a venue, but they wouldn't have a stage or anything, and they didn't have like sound guys who knew what they were doing. A lot of times you had to kind of figure it out for yourself, and one of the things about drums that people who don't play drums don't realize is that you really have to have a carpet under them. You can't just have a drum set sitting on a slick hardwood floor or a linoleum floor, because when you hit the kick drum, it will slide off, right? So I would say, 你们有没有地毯？没有地毯的话，那我的夹子鼓就会滑过去 ，right? So, yeah, 我打第一鼓的时候会滑过去 right? That means like slide away because I don't have a 地毯 right? The floor blanket. And by the way, like, one of the things that every now and then somebody gets all pedantic and they'll be like, well, actually, Phil, in this particular context, tan, it means carpet or rug, not blanket. But the point of saying ground blanket or floor blanket is that it's kind of funny, right? So it is true that tan and tans is blanket. It can be blanket. And so even though in this context it's probably more correctly translated as rug, if I want to remember the word D-tan that means carpet, the better thing to do is to use one of the other definitions like blanket and make yourself laugh. Go like, oh yeah, it's like the floor needs a little blanket, right? It's like kind of funny to me. So use whatever you can to remember a word. Don't be pedantic and focused on etymology. That doesn't matter. Right? It's like, who cares how you remembered a word if the ending result is that it's there for you when you need to speak it, right? So that's another example. Chang. This means like a venue of some kind. And so a changdi. Changdi. This is just the site or ground of some kind. Like you could have a like a shigong changdi. That would be a construction site. It could be the site of some kind of. It could be the site of an event. It kind of depends on what you're dealing with. I used to have to say to people when we were playing ultimate frisbee, it was in this park, and we would try to set up cones so that people could see that we were playing a game, and try not to come on the field. And occasionally, though, people would not realize it, and I would say, "Hey, 你们好，不好意思，这是一个飞盘场地." Right? So like we're playing. This is a frisbee site or ground. So kind of just alerting them that like you're walking on our field. So that's a good one. 工 means to work. So what do you think a 工地 would be? A work floor or ground. Well, 工地 is a construction site, or some kind of work site in general. So before, and what's interesting is that before I said 施工场地, right? So that's the previous word 场地, and I added the full word for construction, which is 施工. But a lot of Chinese words, they'll say, okay, we have this thing called 施工场地. That literally means construction site, but what we're going to do is we're going to take the two most important characters from those four and turn them into one word. So 施工场地 becomes 工地, right? Pretty cool, right? Chinese is very good at contracting meaning down into its most essential points. So it's great. It's a great language to learn for that reason, and many others. 基, well, this is a foundation of some kind, and I've always felt like this character looks like what it means. So if you look at the bottom of the character, that's that component for soil, 土, right? And then above it looks like a building coming out, right? So it's like, of course, a building needs a solid foundation, and it's the same component as the left side of D, right? So here we have a 基地, a foundation, ground or floor. Well, this actually is the base or foundation, and it can also be the base in the sense of like a military base or something like that. Like, for example, in Chengdu, they have the 大熊猫基地. 熊猫基地. So 熊猫 is panda, so the 熊猫基地 is a panda base. And the reason why they call it the 基地 is because they're doing a lot of science and research there as well. I mean, it's open to the public and you can go see the pandas, and I mean, like, good Lord, do they live up to the hype. I mean, pandas are just, you go there and you're just like, you little guys, you are just rolling around. They're the greatest. And so like, the 基地 there, I like that it gets across the idea of it's a foundation and base. It can be literal in that sense, but it's often in that more abstract sense of like, this is the base of operations kind of thing. 落, this means to fall. So if something 落地 falls to the earth or falls to the ground, 落地, well, this is actually to land or touch down, right? So 落 does have this feeling of falling, but it's and it can just mean something fell in a basic sense, but it has a feeling to me. And again, it's talking about how characters develop a feeling earlier. It has a feeling to me of like falling in a manageable way. And part of the way that you can tell that is it has the flower component at the top. So you can imagine like leaves or flower petals falling. They're not just like, whoosh, they're like kind of controlled and nice, right? So as a plane goes down and 落地, so 落地, it touches down in that way. So that's pretty cool, right? 铁, this means iron. So if we have 地铁, the ground iron, 地铁, what do you guys think this would mean? 地铁. Well, this actually refers to the subway, metro, or underground, right? So this is pretty cool. DT is my buddy Nelson actually is the not only is he the voice of the English on our 2 courses, Mandarin speaking and listening Kickstarter, and our upcoming course, the Phrase Vault, he is also the voice of the Chengdu subway system. So if you get onto the Chengdu 地铁, especially line 18, 18号线, then you will hear Nelson saying like, the next stop is, so he's a funny guy, and I was very happy when he got that job. So yeah, there you have Ditia. So let me go back to the old chat there and see what's going on. And by the way, I'll just mention that I've made the point here that the character learning for Mandarin is the hardest part. But if you learn the characters, then you'll discover all of these really interesting words and how easy they are to understand, which is why I put onto the screen join the Mandarin Blueprint Challenge, because that's where we teach you how to learn characters. And just imagine that you learned characters and you knew how to write them, you knew how to, you know what they meant, and you knew how to pronounce them, including the tone, using one simple mnemonic technique that takes 30 seconds to a minute. And then you can come across new words, and you're like, oh yeah, these are easy, right? So I put, by the way, I put the wrong link here, the mandarinbp.com/challenge LS. It should be a capital C. I didn't realize that was going to make that much of a difference. So let me just go ahead and put that in. mandarinbp.com/capital C challenge LS. So I'll pop that in the chat again in case you guys want to check it out. So Mandarin's being challenged, never give up. The Mandarin Blueprint is awesome. John Blue, Snake and Turtle, Qigong, nice. Chinese characters are so hard, they don't have to be anymore, I promise you. Promise you, Hugh. So many characters are words by themselves and also need other characters by their side to become words with the same meaning. It is exhausting sometimes. I know what you're saying, Bogdan. So first of all, there are 7 types of words, and one of the types of words is what we call a juxtaposed word. And the juxtaposed word are, which is a 并列式. The juxtaposed words are essentially the two characters mean the same thing, right? And then you would ask yourself, well, why would they just not use one character then? And the answer is that if you have too many one character words, Chinese gets confusing really fast, because ancient Chinese was one character, one word, always. I mean, like, obviously there was development and evolution over time, but as a general rule of thumb, you can think of ancient Chinese as every single character had its own meaning and own word. But the problem is, life gets more complex. There are more words to say now in the modern world because there are more things, so therefore we need more vocabulary. But if you only have 420 syllables, if everything was a one character word, there would be like 500 characters pronounced D, right? So a lot of times, even though you might have a word that is really just it's two characters that mean the exact same thing, the reason for that is so that you can distinguish it auditorily speaking, so that you can hear it and know, okay, that even though these two characters mean the same thing, because I have both of them in my ear, I know that it's not something else. So that's basically why that happened. And it's also true that many words are still one character. Those are usually the most ancient words, like 吃, to eat, or 水, water. You know, things that are like ancient people would have totally had reason to talk about. And then, you know, things that are relatively more modern. I mean, there's still some words that are, you know, many hundreds of years old that are two characters. But, you know, many of the more modern words are, you know, two characters. Most words are two characters. So yeah. Train station, 地铁站, or 火车站. Bogdan, the reason of that was to get rid of too much ambiguity on homophones. Exactly. So I should read ahead sometimes. You're much more efficient at speaking, DVO. I appreciate it. It's too expensive. I mean, the Mandarin Blueprint Challenge, $7. I mean, like, obviously, you know, maybe that's too expensive for some, but, you know, it's not too bad. Of course, expensive is kind of a relative thing, right? It's like, because the blueprint, the amount of knowledge that it offers you is about as much as a university would. Like, there's, not kidding, like, it's like that much that you learn as a result. And you also learn it better. You learn it methodically, bit by bit, from the foundations, and you have, you know, the ability to do all the different aspects of Chinese. And so compared to a university, it's cheap as hell, right? But of course, you know, I get it. Like, if you don't have, it can be cheap compared to university, but if you were never even close to being able to afford a university, then yeah, sure. It's like, I get that. But I also, you know, everything is compared to something else. And so, yeah. All right. Let me continue on to the next bit, and then I'll go to back to the chat after we go through the next section. So another way that you can use "di" is as locale, right? So what do I mean by that? Well, suppose you just combine "di" with "y," which just means external or outside. Well, that gets you "yd." And "yd," what would that refer to? What does that mean? Well, it just means other places than where you are, foreign places. So if you were talking to somebody and you said, like, 今天晚上有事吗？我们要一起喝一杯吧, right? And that would just mean like, hey, do you have time tonight? Let's go out and have a beer, have a drink, right? If the person then responded like, 不好意思，我在外地, what they're essentially saying is, it doesn't necessarily mean they're not in China, but it means that they're not around. They're not in the city that you're in, right? And so if you wanted to specifically say you weren't in China, you could say 我在国外. 国 is just the general word for country or kingdom, and China is 中国. So if you said 我在国外, then you would say that would be indicating to the person I'm not in China. But if you just said 我在外地, 我在外地, that would just mean I'm not here. I'm in another place. It could be a foreign place, but it just means I'm not where you are, not in your locale. Well, what about the opposite? 内地. 内地, so the internal, the inner, the inside locale. Well, that just means inland or domestic territory, right? So usually when you see 内地, it just refers to the idea of domestic in some way, and it's not in the case. What's interesting is in the case of YD, I've heard Chinese people use that all the time simply to mean I'm not in the area, right? But with 内地, it does tend to mean domestic, and it doesn't tend to mean like in the particular city that I'm in. If you say 内地, that does tend to just mean inland, domestic. It's referring to inside of China if you're in China. But I'm in America, so if I were saying that, this thing was, it's a 内地出口, an internal or a domestic export, right? That might be what you could say there. So, YD, 内地. Then you have 本. I love this character. It means origin, original. It can mean this. It can mean root. It kind of orbits those different ideas. So if you have 本地, well, this refers to a local place or a native place. And usually when you're saying 本地, you're referring to the location where your body is right now, where you're at right now. 本地, right? 这是个本地的公司吗? Would be like saying, is this company from here? Right? Like, is this a company that started here? And so, for example, McDonald's in China would not be a 本地公司, but if it's, I'm in 乐山 and I'm at 乐山银行, which would mean the Bank of 乐山, and I said, 这是个本地公司, 本地银行, they would say yes, because of course it is, right? It's from their locality. Now another one here is 当地. 当 means present or like at, like 当下 means the present moment, right? 当下我在直播. I am presently live streaming. So 当 should give you a sense of that. 当地. This refers to a local situation as well. However, you tend to use 当地 when you're referring to the local location when you're not there, right? So, 这是四川当地的一个习俗, right? So this is a custom of Sichuan, the local area in Sichuan, right? As long as you define the area, then you can say 当地, and we know what you mean is Sichuan. And so, it's just a little distinction there you might want to look out for. 本地, I'm here, and I mean local. 当地 is like I'm talking about a local custom or a local situation of a place I'm not in currently. 个 this is the character that means each and each or every. So in this case you have 各地 which just means everywhere, various places. 各地都有各地都有麦当劳 麦当劳 Sorry, I suppose I said that incorrectly for a second. That just means McDonald's. Everywhere has a McDonald's, right? And obviously it doesn't have to be literally true. There are places that don't have McDonald's, but it's more just that if you you might say it in that way, right? You know, 中国各地都有高铁, right? So that would be everywhere in China has a high-speed train. You know, it's not, again, not technically quite true, but it's like you get the idea. They have a lot. They have a lot of high-speed trains. All right. Chan. Chan means to produce. So Chan Di. What would be the Chan Di? The locale of production? Well, it's the place of production. So, you know, 这是什么产地的杯子, right? So like what is the production place? Where was this made? And in many cases it's 在中国生产. Okay, how about this one? 目的. 目的. And some of you might recognize this character and think it's pronounced d, but in this case it's pronounced di. 目的. So that means target or like, you know, purpose. So a 目的地 is your destination. You will totally use this when talking to taxi drivers. You could just say it as like, you know, you could be pointing, 那是我的目的地. 那是我的目的地. Right? That would be like saying that's my destination, or you can just obviously, something that might happen is you get a call while you're in a taxi and your friend says, hey, we're not going to that place, we're going to this place. And you could say, 师傅, 我需要改我的目的地. Right? So I need to change my destination. And so that's a very useful word. So your target locale is your destination. All right. So next we're going to cover a new character, but I'll just take a moment to look in the chat here for a second. Let's see. Oh, I'm struggling to scroll. Here we go. All right. Yeah, well, we're always happy to give you as much free content as we can, Diego. The HK9 requires 10,000 characters. If I complete the whole blueprint, would that be possible? It's not 10,000 characters, I don't think. I think it's 10,000 words. I've looked at the HSK vocab lists, and there was just around 10,000 words for the HSK9. Now, the HSK9, so first of all, the truth of the matter is that I'm pretty confident in saying that you would be able to pass the HSK 7 through 9 test, because that is one test. It is they give you one test for the 7, 8, and 9, so you either fail or you pass with a 7, 8, or 9 grade, right? So I passed the HSK 6, which was at the time the highest level. The HSK 9 has only been in existence for a few years. When I took it in 2016, the highest level was the HSK 6, and I passed it along with Luke after 2 years of study, and really just 1 year of good study, using the same techniques we do with Mandarin Blueprint. However, I hear that the HSK 9 is harder than the HSK 6 was. So while I can't be sure, what I can tell you is that we didn't have Mandarin Blueprint when we were doing it. We didn't have a laid out plan that goes all the way from 0 to knowing 3,000 plus characters and 11,800 words. And we didn't understand like as much about how to get the most out of immersion, which we teach in the Mandarin Immersion Masterclass and all of that. And so I feel very confident that you would be able to do very well on that test. As for guaranteeing whether or not you would pass with an HSK 9, I'm afraid I don't know enough about the test and why it is harder to be able to comment too much, and therefore I don't want to say that. But I would be very surprised if you followed the instructions and did all the materials and didn't at least get a passing grade on the HSK 7 through 9. Be very, very surprised about that. Also, who cares? The HSK is not that important. You know what I mean? Unless you have a specific reason, like maybe there's a job that wants you to pass the HSK. Like, what matters with language acquisition is that you are able to communicate with the people who matter to you and your life. So the HSK, not really a huge, big fan of it. You know, I did it because I guess, I don't know, something to do. But, like, I don't know. I didn't think it was that important. And it's never mattered either that I passed it. Hey, how do I know that I'm pronouncing the ZH, CH, and other different sounds correctly? Because it's always difficult when I try using my Google Translate. Well, first of all, you want to just make sure you're getting good instruction, right? So I'd highly recommend that you check out our video on pronunciation. We have a whole section on that. We also have a course called Pronunciation Mastery, which is 8 hours long, and one of our most popular courses. It gets, I don't know if it's ever even gotten a 4-star review. It's just like all 5-star reviews across the board. Great course. My business partner Luke teaches it. He has excellent pronunciation, and that's a huge thing. You want to do shadowing. Like, another thing about pronunciation is you never stop thinking about it. It just becomes less of what you think about, right? I still consider my pronunciation these days. It's just not a huge amount because I've spent so much time doing it. But so get great instruction. Then shadow Chinese content. We have another video on shadowing on our YouTube channel about how to. It's basically you're listening, reading, and speaking at the same time, in such a way that you're kind of listening and repeating, and then you listen and repeat it first, and then you do it at the same time as the speaker. That helps a lot. When you do that, record yourself, because then you'll be able to even spot it yourself when you're making errors. This is one of the instances in which a language exchange is good, or even working with a tutor is good. I'm always skeptical of tutors simply because there's such a variance in quality. If you find a great tutor, it's awesome, but I just recommend that you just use tutors for conversation practice and pronunciation correction. Those are the two things. And again, it's not absolutely necessary, because if you record yourself and you keep shadowing and you keep doing listen and repeat and you get good instruction in the first place, it's going to be pretty damn good. And remember, you don't have to have perfect native-like pronunciation. You just have to have good enough pronunciation to communicate what you want to say. And it's like when I hear somebody speaking English who English is not their first language and that they have a bit of an accent, right? I don't care at all if they're good at English, right? I get over it like instantly, and it's the same thing for Chinese people. Like, if you were speaking Chinese, like my Chinese pronunciation is not as good as Luke's is, but it doesn't mean that I haven't been able to do all the same types of stuff that Luke does, because at the end of the day, once you get good enough, the differences in the experiences you can have a lot more to do with your personality than your skill with the language. Like, there's a barrier you pass where you're no longer concerned about, is my pronunciation a problem? It's like, no, you're speaking so well in terms of getting your point across that people have gotten over if there's a little issue on the margins with your pronunciation. Okay. I do not know how to explain it. Just listen, imitate how other people say, and dare to speak. Then you'll know how to speak Cantonese. Oh yeah, Cantonese is it's very interesting listening to Cantonese, because I don't speak it, but you can hear that it's a related language family, so when I hear people speaking Cantonese, I can tell, first of all, I can instantly tell it's Cantonese, and I can also it's interesting to listen to. It's like, whoa, every now and then they'll throw in a word and I'll be like, oh, that clearly shares some shared pronunciation with Mandarin, but it's a little bit different. Like, I remember I heard in Mandarin Chinese you say 安全带 for safety belt, and I'm probably going to get the Cantonese wrong here, but I was listening on the flight to Hong Kong, and they were saying it sounded something like 安全带, something like that. I don't know if that's true. The person who knows Cantonese can correct me, but it seemed like it was somewhat similar. Okay. Entertainment officials, ZH and CH are almost the same. ZH is Taiwan accent, CH is China accent. Okay, that's interesting. I mean, I don't know enough about the difference in the Chinese, the Taiwanese accent. I mean, I know that when I talk to Taiwanese people, they are, I can understand them, and they can understand me. Let's see here. That's an interesting point, Bogdan. I mean, I guess somebody could be lying to themselves about the flashcards. I've always thought of the flashcards as being the best way to ensure that you're remembering stuff, because what will happen if you keep hitting correct even though it's not correct is that you'll start to hate your flashcards. And like, we really tell people not to do that. So like, as far as I'm concerned, if you're marking yourself wrong, right, when you should be marking yourself wrong, you're not following our instructions. And if you do follow our instructions, then your testing system is, your flashcards will do the job. And of course, then your other testing system is going out and talking to people and having a conversation. But that's an interesting point. I mean, maybe, I think that it's one of those things that, if somebody is unwilling to say that they got something wrong in a flashcard, that's kind of like their own psychological issue, because it's like nobody knows except for you, right? Nobody is judging your flashcard correctness. So if you're unwilling to even say it, it's like, I don't know, it's like you're just hurting yourself, because like the flashcard software is built around the idea that you say honestly what you got right and wrong. And if you got it wrong, then it's good to say that, because that means you'll see it more often. If you say you got it right when you didn't really know it, that means it's even less likely you're going to know it as you move forward. So yeah. Let's see here. I hope more people join this content. It's wonderful, easy to learn and understand. Great. This is a Mandarin of course. Who cares about Cantonese? I care about Cantonese, even though I don't know it yet. Maybe one day I'll learn it. I'm not aware of Bopomofo. I'm aware of Bopomofo and the Yale romanization, and there's some other ones. But Pinyin is just what they use in mainland China, and so it's all over the place. Like, you see it all over the place. So it's like not knowing it and using something else would have just been frustrating, because like everything that you see has Pinyin associated with it. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to go continue into the next bit, which is about the character Kwai. So Kwai, by itself, this refers to a lump, and it has that soil component there again on the left. And, so if you had some kind of a lump of something, you could call it a Kwai. But it's often used as a measure word, and one of the measure words it's used for is money, qian. And so this is a really common one that you'll use. So for example, if I say, number kuai qian, what I mean is like that many bucks. It's like a measure word for qian. So if I say 10块钱, it means like $10. And the reason why I'm saying bucks and not some specific currency is because, technically speaking, kuai is just a measure word for currency, because coins used to be kind of like little pieces and little lumps. You can imagine you had lumps of silver and whatever. So I can see the kind of etymology of this, of like why it would have been the correct measure word. And so by saying 10块钱, that works no matter what country you're in Chinese. So like if I was talking to a Chinese restaurant owner in Thailand, and in Thailand they have baht, and there's a way more baht to $1 than there are RMB to $1. So I might say 3万块钱, right? And that would mean 30,000 baht, and they know it means 30,000 baht because I'm in Thailand. So you don't have to specify. However, if you combined kuai with renminbi, then you could say, X kuai renminbi, which means X Chinese RMB, or if it were one, it would be 1 kuai renminbi. 1 Chinese RMB, Chinese yuan is another word for it. But renminbi literally means the people's currency. So this is the official word for the Chinese currency. Yuan is another word that has come to mean the same thing, but that's kind of that's a abbreviation, and people do say it. But what people say the most is they just say kuai. They'll just say 10 kuai. They might say 10 kuai renminbi, but that's very formal. It's like really, you might hear that at a bank or something. But if you're just talking to the teller, they'll probably say 10 kuai. And you just know it's like $10, right? It's like saying that. You know it's RMB because you're in China. You don't need to say each time 10 kuai renminbi. It just feels very like too formal. Just say 10 kuai. And some people will say 10 yuan. Sure, that's people say that. But I think kuai is probably the most common. It's just that it's easy for a foreigner to think that what the person is, it's easy for a foreigner to think that kuai is just the word for Chinese RMB, but it's not. It's the measure word for money. And of course, if you're in China, then it's implied. Sure, yeah, it's RMB here. But I could say 10 kuai in America, and it means $10. But if I did want to say American dollars, I would refer to 美金. So if I said, I made a little mistake there. I forgot to add in the pinyin for 美金. So I'll fix that later. But the if I said 一块美金, that would mean $1. If I said 10块美金, that would mean $10. And 美 it's funny. That's the character for beautiful in Chinese. And America ended up being called 美国, which is like beautiful country. You know, so that's the name of America. And it's kind of funny to me because obviously these days China and America have more tension than they've had previously. But every time you're reading about it, you're like, you keep seeing the character for beautiful all over. And they're like, I'm so angry at what America did here. And it's like, I'm so angry at the beautiful thing. It's kind of funny. But that's how you say American dollar. And jin is just the general character for gold. So 10块美金 is $10. And jin in general is gold. So actually now we're going to get out of the measure words. Kuai jin, kuai jin. Well, now that we're not talking about a measure word anymore, what this actually means is a gold nugget. So this isn't a measure word, it's just a noun. Kuai jin, right? A gold nugget. And so in this case, it's more literal, lump, right? What kind of a lump? A golden lump, right? 血 or 血. This this character, it means blood, and it either is pronounced 血 or 血. Depends on the context. I think a lot of times people use both. But 血块. Well, let's think about this. It's a blood lump. Well, doesn't take too big of a leap to imagine that a 血块 is a blood clot. It's a little lump of, you know, clotted blood that creates a problem in your body. So it's a blood clot. And again, it's funny how Chinese sometimes, like, I would think, having not necessarily thought much about blood clots while I was in China, that it might be something more complicated, but that happens all the time. It's like, no, it's not. It's just literally blood lump. That's all it is. Chinese is such a simple language sometimes. Okay, kuai ban. Well, we actually looked at ban earlier when we saw D-ban, right? So a kuai ban. Or sorry, ban is the other word. It's a ban kuai. So ban kuai, a panel lump or a panel piece. Well, this is just a plate or a section of something. And so it's actually quite a useful word because whenever you're dealing with something that has pieces, you could say, but it's a pieces of a whole, you can refer to it as a ban kuai, right? I can think of that in terms of like, you know that gym flooring they have that's like to make weights hit it and it's not so bad, like it's not loud, but it's like very tough kind of material. Usually it's in these square ban kuais, right? And you can just move them around. 用那两个板块把这个板子讲过来, right? So like use those two pieces to have this you know, bench raised up a little bit. Okay, biong. This means ice. Biong kuai. So an ice piece. Bet you guys can imagine what this is. It's an ice cube. So yet another example of where Chinese is very simple. Now I'm going to do one more slide here, and then I'll take a look at the chat because this one's fairly straightforward. Yang. So this character means sheep. It refers to the animal, sheep or lamb, like that general animal. And if you want to get more specific, you add some other elements. But first, let's look at Mao. So this means hair. So if we had Yang Mao, what do you guys think that is? Well, it's the wool of a sheep or the fleece. Pi, skin. Well, yeah, Yang Pi. Sure you guys can figure it out. It's sheepskin or goat skin, right? So a lot of times with some characters, it's very easy, especially with nouns. Gong. Now, gong doesn't mean male for humans, but for animals, it does. So a gong yang. What do you guys think a gong yang is? Well, that'll be a ram, right? And a mu yang. This is funny to me because ewe here, I didn't really even know that a female sheep was called a ewe because I think that we tend to just not, like, we'll mention a ram because they've got those horns and they ram into each other, but we won't think as much about, like, the female sheep, like, official name because we're just like, they're all sheep in some way. And so, yeah, I learned something learning that. So this is a good example of where when you learn another language, they categorize the world in some ways that are the same, but some ways that are different. And then you end up thinking about things that you never thought about before. Jiao. Well, this just means a horn. So a yang jiao means a ram's horn. And usually it's referring to a ram's horn in this case because, I don't think that ewes have horns. Rou. Yang rou. So meat, well, sheep meat, well, this is mutton. This is the, lamb that you eat, the sheep that you eat. And this is important to recognize is that, like, if you want to be at a restaurant and you want to order something, you don't say, like in English, we would say, I want chicken, right? And in Chinese, you wouldn't say, I want to eat ji, which is the word for chicken. You would say ji rou. You always add in the meat, right? So ji rou. Niu is the general word for a cow or an ox. Niu rou is beef, or, and in the case of cows and beef, yeah, you don't say I want to eat cow. You say I want to eat beef, right? So it's a little bit different there. But in the case of, you might say I want to have lamb. You wouldn't, in Chinese, you would say, lamb or sheep meat. Pai, which is steak. So yang pai, that would be lamb chops. So you can see here that this is a simpler character to learn, but what's interesting is that yang ends up being a major component in a lot of characters that come after it. So the purpose of this particular type of presentation today was to show you and give you a sense of how interesting combining the different characters can be, and just how easy Chinese words are to learn so long as you know the characters. And that is a big if. So learning the characters is something that, you can't just, if you don't have a strategy for learning the characters, it's very difficult. But we built a whole system just to help solve this problem, just to build the strategy of, okay, this is the best way to properly acquire characters using a mnemonic technique called the Henzi movie method, where you're going to use people, objects, places, and actions in your memory of them to connect to Chinese characters in such a way that you learn the definition, writing, pronunciation, including the tone of the character. And by doing that, that means that you learn the main pronunciation of the character, the main meaning, you combine it with the main pronunciation and main meaning of another character, and then you see, oh, this is obvious. It's the male sheep. Well, I know that's a ram, right? It's like, oh, it's the sheep skin. Oh, I wonder what that is. Like, it's so easy at this level. And I'm actually amazed sometimes at how few exceptions to rules there are in Chinese. Like, when there is a word that doesn't follow the rules, it always really sticks out to me because, like in English, they'll say I before E except after C. And then there's like 25 words that put, either E before I, not after C, or there is an E before I. Like it breaks the rule, right? A bunch of times. And in Chinese, that just doesn't happen very much. It's a very logical, unified language. So, let's take a look at the chat here a little bit. All right. So RMB is pinyin for ISO-coded CNY. I suppose so. It's the same way with all the other teachers, including online, how to write the correct stroke order for each characters. Of course, you need to learn the principle of stroke order in kindergarten, right? Yeah, sure. Should you focus on input or output the most when you're only a few months in? Input for sure. I think that output is actually input is where the acquisition happens and the passive vocabulary builds up, and that must come before you can activate a piece of vocabulary. You can't activate a piece of vocabulary that you've never heard before, right? So if you never have heard like the Chinese word for egalitarianism, right? Then you can't just activate it and produce it in your output without having ever heard it before. It's like, how could that ever be? But once you study 平均主义, then you go, okay, I've heard that now. I understood it. It was in context of like a speech I was listening to. And then what happens is it enters your passive vocabulary. You can understand it when other people say it. And then you get into conversation. For some reason, you want to say the word egalitarianism, and you go, 平均主义是美国宪法的基础, right? So I wanted to say that egalitarianism is at the foundation of the American Constitution. I'm not saying that I actually think that, obviously, but it's like, that could be something you say, right? So you have to build up the input first so that there is something to say. And then my experience with output is that you just try to speak and say your point, and if you've gotten enough input, then the words are there for you. But if you haven't gotten enough input, then you need to get more input. Like, it's like, if you don't know how to speak, now there are some advantages to outputting in terms of understanding. For example, if you're talking to somebody, they'll sometimes say a word that you've never heard before, but because you're in a conversation about it and they teach it to you in that moment, you can end up learning it in that moment and start to use it right away. That can happen, but it's still technically input before output. You learn the word and then you immediately use it. But you couldn't have used it before they said it. See what I mean? So like, it is possible for the input to passive vocabulary, output to active vocabulary to happen very quickly, which is why it is good to get into conversation sometimes. But what I'm just saying is that, especially in the early days, you want to make sure that you're mostly inputting, and your main job in your early days of learning is to build comprehension by learning pronunciation and characters so that it's possible for you to understand, and then get as many understandable messages into your eyes and ears as possible. And the more comprehension you build, the more characters and pronunciations you build, the more you'll be able to understand, and then you can immerse more, and then you can get more comprehensible input all around. And so then you end up in a situation where there's something to say when you go to speak. Like, your brain is not blank. And again, if you don't know what to say in a moment, you go to speak and you go, you know what, I don't know what to say here. The solution is always to get more input, and you just maybe want to get that input in a targeted fashion. So for example, I one time, this was a few years back, but I do remember it well because I was already quite fluent in Chinese. I'd done loads of, just many things in China, played gigs with my band, hosted events even. And so, speaking in Chinese to people was not a problem, generally speaking. But then I went to a bike shop to get my bike fixed. And I realized I don't know anything about bike vocabulary. I never really thought about it. I mean, I don't even know a lot of the vocabulary in English sometimes, but certainly I know more in English than in Chinese. And I was talking to the guy and I was laughing about it because I was like, I was saying to him, I was like, I swear, if we talk about, drumming, you'd hear me say, you'd think I'm more fluent than you because you probably don't know a bunch of drumming terms, right? But when it comes to cycling, I never learned any of these words. So if I wanted to get better at that, I would look at I would go watch some tutorial videos on YouTube or Youku that are all about cycling, right? And so that's the best way to handle the input-output problem, I think. Okay. Oh yeah, Penti. Da Penti. Grammar is a difficult thing for us because we do not have concept that changes the word by different tenses. That's definitely true in Chinese. I mean, I know that you're talking about Cantonese, but it's just Chinese in general. They don't have tenses in the same way, and other word form changes. Good, better, best, right? Things like that. And yeah, it's we had our Serbian friend in here earlier. That's what happened with me in Serbia. I kind of went oh boy, I've never really learned a language that has these kinds of declensions and these kinds of word form changes that are based on so many different contextual factors. So I was just kind of I'm not gonna really put the effort into this because it's not that I didn't want to learn Serbian for any reason. It's just that my entire in-laws, they all speak English, so I can still communicate with them and talk with them. And so it was kind of we're not going to live in Serbia, and because you have to have a good why, right? You have to have a good why for what you're going to do. With Chinese, there's a bunch of whys that you could have and not, even want to live in China because there's Chinese people all over the world. And while there are some Serbian people all over the world, there's only about 8 million people in the country overall, and most of them are there, right? So if you're not living there, it's it's like this of any language that hasn't become very ubiquitous. It's like English is the lingua franca of the world, but then Chinese has the most individual native speakers. There are more speakers of English in the world, but most of them are English as a second language. And so anyway, really interesting stuff you guys are asking today. Every time I do this, it gets more fun, more interesting. Just a reminder, if any of you would like to join the Mandarin Blueprint Challenge, which goes over the first 124 characters in the Mandarin Blueprint Method course, gets you to learn about 70 to 80 words, and then puts those words into sentences so that you can read them without pinyin and understand what they mean. Take the Mandarin Blueprint Challenge. I'm dropping the link here in the chat. And I wrote it incorrectly here. It's a capital C, mandarinbb.com/C challenge LS for live stream. That helps us know that you guys are enjoying the live stream. And also in the description of this, there's a bunch of other free stuff that we have. If you guys have never taken Mandarin Blueprint, or you're not sure where to go next in your Chinese learning journey, take our free quiz that gives you a scorecard. Also, any of the things that you join today, if you join a scorecard, you join the challenge, we have a couple other free resources in the links below in the description. We'll also be offering a big fun sale at the end of this month on our course, the Kickstarter, the Mandarin Speaking and Listening Kickstarter, and there's going to be some bonuses in that we've never done before. So if you're interested in getting involved, you can just get any one of our free resources below. That will get, from there we'll have your email address and we'll send you the promotion. And also, just a general point I wanted to make about email. We work really, really hard on email to make sure that we're always providing you with value, right? So we don't, sure, occasionally we'll tell you about a thing that we're promoting, but it's always in the context of value, because I'm not interested in ever sending you something that makes no good point, that that doesn't have anything valuable to offer that will make you think or teach you about Chinese, or maybe just give you a perspective on life. Because of course, Mandarin Chinese learning, it requires commitment and dedication, and commitment and dedication sometimes require thinking deeply about why you're doing something. And so we've given a lot of thought to these emails and try to make them in such a way that you guys will like them. So, you know, these days people get a lot of emails. They think that like it's all just marketing. And I don't know, you know, marketing, it's like, yes, of course we would love people to buy our products, right? But we want our products to be 10 times more valuable than the price. Like, we want the value they give to be so much more valuable than the alternatives that you feel like it was a great deal. And then even when we're talking about something like an email or a live stream or anything that gets people to know about our products and go like, hey, maybe I want to join this course, our goal is always value first. You know, I really get annoyed when companies are just really into the marketing techniques and they don't take time to consider that if you market something that is a mediocre product, that's what's contributing to people's sense of, you know, sleazy business practices. And it does bad. It soils the name of people like us who, sure, like we, you know, this is our livelihood. Of course we need people to buy our products, but it's not the goal. Our goal is to provide value. So anyway, that's my little rant there at the end, just to remind you that if you join our email list, you can count on the fact that we're not going to just bombard you with a bunch of sleazy sales tactics. What we're interested in is providing you value. And yeah, we'll tell you about our promotions when they're happening, which, you know, usually are something that you would want if you're interested in Mandarin learning. So thank you, everyone, and have